Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! This happened some time ago around the year 2011, so details can be fuzzy. Anyways, let's start. This whole thing started when I went to a summer karate camp. It's just a typical camp where a bunch of karatekas get together, train, and have some fun. Luckily, my aunt and uncle are the camp bosses, so they allow me to join in on the fun for free. Everything started smoothly just like every year. Everyone goes to the mess hall, and the rules are passed around. They tell us when we need to go to the mess hall for breakfast and dinner, and they announce who is going to be with who inside the rooms. Since the people responsible for the room replacement is my aunt, I got to weigh in on who I want to be with in a room, so I gathered all my best mates. But this power also came at a price. Since she knew me, she asked if my room could be next to this new guy. He was around my age, because he's a little bit different from the other guys, and I have a reputation of easily making friends. So naturally, I agreed. One of the worst decisions of my life. Okay, so the guy that was going to be in the room next to me at first seemed like a nice guy at first. Wasn't really that shy since he sort of spoke with me, but it turns out that he's a foreigner here just like me, so he hasn't really mastered the language. I just go with it, it's no big deal. I know my friends weren't rude to me about my way of speaking, and so why should I be rude to him for that? But after day 1 of karate camp is when he started to be more bold. Since he noticed I was an easygoing guy, he decided that I would be the perfect guy to mess with to get cool points from the rest of the camp goers. He purposely blasted loud music late at night so that I couldn't sleep. I'm a guy who really needs his sleep. Pulled pranks on me like making me trip, smearing my door handles with toothpaste, put briar behind my neck to make me itch uncontrollably, making jokes about me, you know, like look at me, I'm OP, I'm so stupid, blah blah blah. So yeah, you get the idea, a real nuisance to society. But there was one thing he did that crossed the line. Since I knew the people running the camp, I was allowed to have contraband materials, games, soda, junk food, and so on. Thanks to this, throughout my camping experience, I had a Game Boy Advance SP with Pokemon Sapphire that I had invested almost 10 years to training my Pokemons and playing. It had sentimental value to me because it was the first Pokemon that I legit raised to level 100. It was a Steelix named Steely. Steely, every night in my dreams I can still see you, forever in my heart. This guy decided that the ultimate prank he could pull on me was to overwrite my save file. So one day, he creeped into my room, possibly when sleeping. Still no clue as to how he managed to do it, took the Game Boy and got rid of my save file. Once I woke up and the damage was done, I felt devastated, all those years of hard work down the drain. My first level 100 Pokemon lost forever, so my mind just broke in. I decided that for killing my precious Steely, blood had to be spilled. So I decided that I will play it cool and pretend it was a good prank to lower suspicion and get to know this douche to make sure my revenge is super effective. So I started to hang out with him. Late night talks were my usual espionage methods. Some reason people tend to say some personal stuff at these hours, to figure out what he likes and weaknesses I can exploit or basically use against him. Turns out he lives within walking distance from me. His family has sort of complicated relationships with each other, and lastly, the most crucial piece of information is that this guy enjoys going to junkyards and breaking old things like cars, old TVs and stuff like that. I remember that in the fields that are almost just behind my house, a neighbor keeps some of his old cars out in those fields, and I knew that he rarely uses them. I used to play Apocalypse Survivor, making campfires, s'mores, and pretending to fight bandits there, and those cars were sometimes open, so I used them as props. After sharing that information, he proceeds to show me recordings on his phone of how he wrecked stuff. So I told him that there are a few cars on the fields nearby me that are abandoned and could probably be demolished, And as I thought, he took the bait. We become better friends during the camp, so we exchanged phone numbers just to stay in touch. Fast forward a few days, everyone went home after karate camp, and out of the blue, I got a text from him. "Are these the cars?" And he lists the colors and models of the cars. I start smiling to myself and think, yes, he actually is going for it. Told him yes, those are the cars and that I couldn't go there to be sure because I was away spending time with my family, and after some time I got a text. "What the hell, dude?" And I responded, "What? Is there something wrong?" And after a few moments of silence, he wrote back to me. He told me that the cars weren't in fact abandoned and were actually someone's property, my neighbor's. I pretended to be shocked and said, "What? You can't be serious." Turns out my neighbor, as planned, saw him from the window wrecking the cars, called the police, ran out and tackled him and kept him there until the police arrived. They took him into the station and called for his parents, and just as I had hoped, his parents were tired of dealing with his nonsense and left him at the police station to fend for himself. I think he had to work somewhere to pay for the damages for the car somehow, and some community service or something. Sorry, I didn't care to find out the details anymore. Just to clear some things up, I managed to not get into trouble because of a couple things. I never was there with him. I never did any damage to those cars. I only told him about those cars and never mentioned he should wreck them. After some time, I managed to see him roaming around the streets, and he just glares at me with pure hatred for ruining his life. And to be quite honest, it feels super good to be evil. This happened about 15 years ago when I was living overseas. Now I'm in the US. Let's just say that I used to live in a developing country back at the time. Me and my friend, let's call him Han, were driving around the city one night when he got a phone call from his older brother, let's call him Barry. The phone call, from what I was able to comprehend, was pretty intense. After Han hung up, he was pretty frustrated. He told me to drive over to the supermarket near his parents' house, and I did. I asked Han what was wrong, and he said it looks like Barry has gotten into a fight and that he needs our help. I told him let's go see what's going on. On our way to the supermarket, Han called a couple of our friends and told them to meet us there for extra support. I know how this may sound, it sounds like we're a bunch of gangbangers looking to start some mess. So before y'all start jumping into conclusions, let me give you some background. The community I used to live in is heavily tribal. It's not about ganging up, but more like standing up and being there for a friend in need. That's the commotion mindset, and that's their way of life. It's pretty backwards at this day and age. And it's worth pointing out that I'm completely against that mindset now, especially that I'm living in the US. But anyway, we eventually arrived at that supermarket. It was in a very busy and vibrant area with lots of traffic. We parked our cars at the front door and stood out in the street waiting for Barry, until he showed up. He was enraged, but yet calm and on point. We asked him what was going on, so he went on explaining. Apparently Barry and Han's mom went into the supermarket to buy some chicken. She did manage to buy some chicken in a sealed container. She needed it to cook for the day, but when she got home and opened that container, that chicken smelled absolutely rotten and disgusting. Understandably, she decided to go back to the store and return that chicken. Notify the store management and get another chicken that isn't salmonella in a box, since she shops there quite often. I know my friend's mom, she's not a Karen in any way, and she's this super sweet lady in her 60s who's very friendly with everyone she meets. When she went into the store, found the store manager, told him about the rotten chicken, and asked him politely to give her a different one. She was even discreet about it and didn't want other customers to hear. The manager was super rude and refused to acknowledge that there is anything wrong with the chicken. Outright refused to exchange the chicken and wouldn't even smell or look at it. He called her a liar and told her to get the heck out of his store. Han, having learned that his mom was insulted that way, was pretty furious. Barry told us that he was going inside to talk to that manager and give him a piece of his mind, and that he wanted us to be there on standby in case things went down. We agreed, and waited outside. Barry went in. We were looking at him through the glass door and we saw him speak to that manager with a clear understanding of how heated the conversation was getting. Basically, Barry asked the manager if he's the one who told his mom to get the heck out. And the manager says, "Yes, and get the heck out too." And he shoves him away. Now a little background on Barry. He was feared. He's always been kinda problematic since he was little. He was never a bully, but he just never took nonsense from anybody ever. Now, while I didn't agree with the way he handled things, I've always respected how he stands up for himself and for the people he cares about. It's worth mentioning that he's a lot more calm now. Within seconds of him going into the store, and after hearing how belligerent that manager was, Barry lost control over his rage, and we saw him start throwing punches at the manager. Other employees joined in on the fight too, and hell broke loose. Me, Han, and another friend of ours immediately jumped into the store. We started to trade punches with whoever was fighting. It was an utter mess. All I remember was that I punched the manager a few times and then I was on the ground. I didn't get punched or anything and still have no idea how I ended up on the ground. Luckily, no one got really injured from either side, but we had a clear advantage over them. The aftermath was horrific though. Glass was broken, shelves were knocked down, and product stands were destroyed. I still remember M&Ms scattered all over the floor. It was a hot mess. At that time, we knew we were absolutely screwed. We pretty much vandalized the whole store and physically assaulted its staff. Eventually, we left and stood in front of the store and started cussing them out. They stayed inside the store because they knew that the law would be on their side while they are on their property. So about the laws in that country, they make absolutely no sense whatsoever. A good example of its ridiculous laws is, if you get physically assaulted by someone and you decide you want to press charges and you do just that, you will need to go get a doctor's note stating your injury, and then head to a police station and press charges. The person who assaulted you will get a phone call from the police telling them to come to the police station, and that person can also press charges the same way, even if they are not at all injured. If both parties have pressed charges, both parties will go to jail awaiting trial, unless bailed out. It's also worth mentioning that obtaining a forged doctor's note in that country is easier than buying a tub of sour cream. That's a fact. That said, we knew that we better hurry and press charges. We got to the police station before the supermarket staff and filed a complaint against them. They eventually arrived like 15 minutes later to do the same thing. It was a jerk manager and another guy that was in the fight too. At the police station, it was a shock to me how nicely we were being treated by officers and how bad they treated the supermarket staff. Like, what is going on? Shouldn't we be in handcuffs right now? What I didn't know was this. While we were standing out the door cursing those guys out after the fight, Barry disappeared. He did meet at the police station, but we didn't know what he was doing after the fight was over. Well, it turns out that while Barry was exiting the store after the fight, he started yelling, "My name is Barry, and I'm not done screwing you up." Apparently, a passing by police patrol heard Barry yell at the top of his lungs and stopped to see what was going on. Out of sheer coincidence, one of the patrolling officers turned out to be a distant cousin of Barry. It's a small country, and he recognized his name while he was shouting it. He took Barry aside for a word and started asking him what was going on. Barry explained the entire story of how they insulted his mom after selling her bad chicken and refused to admit any wrongdoing. The officer also turned out to be an on-duty health and safety inspector. He then took it personally and assured Barry that he will take care of it. Anyway, back to the police station. Now that both parties had pressed charges, the police were clearly favoring us. They threw the supermarket staff in a cell while we were sitting on the couch sipping coffee. Barry was still cursing the manager out. Eventually, we reached an agreement to drop all the charges and we all went our way. Now for the real revenge. After the store was picked up and everything went back to normal, kinda, Barry's officer cousin went to the supermarket for an inspection the next day. Do you see where this is going? Yep. He found tons and tons of badly stored meat of all kinds that was completely inedible and could potentially be life-threatening. He also found spoiled dairy and buttloads of expired items. Apparently, the owner orders the staff to unplug the fridges and freezers at night to save on electricity. The owner was knowingly selling rotten meat to save a few bucks. The store was immediately shut down pending investigation. The health ministry got involved and fined the supermarket, and the fine was just so huge that the store stayed shut down and never opened again, because the owners weren't able to financially recover. Just before the lockdown, I worked for a small telecom company that did contract work for a national cell carrier. We will call them Crab Inc. and Big Wireless. I was hired on as a full-time employee for Crab Inc. along with every other technician, and we were not contractors. This will be important later. I was really good at my job. I've been in the field for over 20 years, so I knew my stuff and most problems were easy enough to troubleshoot and repair. But sometimes we needed a second tech to help out with bigger issues, which is understandable in our field. Crab Inc. was shady, unbeknownst to us at the bottom of the ladder, but we were about to find out. About 4 months in, new orders came down the chain that, from henceforth, we were to do double trips on every ticket. This meant we had to drive out with no parts, assess a problem, then make a return trip with parts to fix it. 2 trips equal double pay for company. Even on simple things like pushing a reset button. 2 trips. No excuses. Then they began cutting our hours, tracking our every move, and redoing our timesheets after submitting it, with the excuse of "employees are stealing time and we are going to prove it." The latest rule was a good one. All employees must work at least 2 tickets each day in order to be considered for a full 8 hours of pay and 40 hours per week. No ticket, no pay. With this, they began holding mandatory bi-weekly meetings to go over every minute of our trips, overlaying GPS data, timestamps, travel distance, and so on. They docked pay for gas station stops, pee breaks, phone calls, and everything. They even tried to not pay us for these very meetings because our trucks were off and couldn't prove we were working. Buddy, I am not a contractor. I'm a full-time employee. Enter glorious malicious compliance. See, the thing is, I don't take too kindly to people stealing from my paycheck and gaslighting me about it. And apparently the other employees felt the same way. Give me one solid night of prep work and I will beat you at your own game. The next weekend I held a meeting of my own with the techs, and after some explanation, we all decided that the company was absolutely right. 2 tickets, 2 trips, every minute's accounted for, and the GPS data to prove it. Monday morning meetings rolled around and every tech drove to the nearest site to have our mandatory 2-hour meeting. The trucks aren't at home and running the entire time. Our daily tickets come in and we drive directly to the site, idle for 2 hours while we check out the problem, then do our second trip to get the parts, as instructed, and spend 2 hours fixing it, drive time not included. A second daily ticket comes in and what's this? I can't seem to figure out the problem. I guess I'll have to call another tech who only had 1 ticket to help me. Glad he was free. Let's ponder this problem for 2 hours while wasting fuel. Now we need parts. Looks like we both have to go get them. Return trip complete, another 2 hours to kill and fix the problem. Let's see how we did. First ticket, 2 hours assessment plus 1 hour travel time, GPS logged. 2 hour return trip plus 1 hour travel time, GPS logged. Second ticket, 2 hours assessment plus 1 hour travel time, GPS logged. 2 hour return trip plus 1 hour travel time, GPS logged. 2 hour meeting, part 2, GPS logged. Hey boss, Crab Inc. owes every tech 64 hours of work this week. Let's check the mass and GPS logs just to be sure. Oh, and for some reason, the fuel expenses went up. But at least we have the GPS data you need for our extremely accurate PowerPoint presentation. Update per request. Crap Inc. folded from embezzlement, misappropriation of funds, and sued by Big Wireless for 2 trips, no excuse, among other things. There were a few jail sentences handed out. Not sure if anyone got a piece of that pie. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.